bring this work session on the Heritage Land Bank public hearing draft to order. It's 2:08. Let's go around the room and identify ourselves for the record, starting with Mr. Gates.
Robin Ward, Heritage Land Bank Director.
Nicole Jones-Vogel, Land Management Officer.
Forrest Dunbar.
Christopher Constant.
Pete Peterson.
Suzanne France.
John Middleton.
Mr. Chairman. Great. Okay, so we're going to start with a short presentation, I believe, from Ms. Ward.
Yes, just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of the plan. I think everyone has a copy of the plan. This is our Heritage Land Bank Commission. We were established in 1983, and our purpose and mission was to acquire and manage land from the state of Alaska as part of our Municipal Entitlement Act, but we basically manage all uncommitted vacant land on behalf of the municipality for future use. We are required each year to bring forward a 1-year and 5-year plan to the Assembly for approval. We are the only division that is authorized to manage conservation easements. Our mission is to manage uncommitted municipal land in the Heritage Land Bank Fund in a manner designed to benefit present and future residents of Anchorage, promote orderly development, and achieve goals of the comprehensive plan. A couple of the things that I just want to give you a highlight of some of the things that we did last year. That's part of our plan as our accomplishments. You might recognize this as the Girdwood Bike Alliance, and we, along with the Assembly, approved the easement, and they will be starting work on that, I'm hoping at least partly this summer. The Girdwood Industrial Park, HLB holds the only industrial land in Girdwood other than Crow Creek Mine. And so we are a big focus when it comes to industrial activity. We have platted the first phase of 5 lots. The contract has already been let. They've cleared the right-of-way, and as soon as the load limits are off, we will see construction of Bedrock Circle. It's the name of our circle in there. So we hope to have that construction, which will be sewer and road, drainage, and so on, completed by the end of July this year. So we allow part of and permit part of our property for Girdwood Forest Fair, mostly for the camping side of it. We still have, if anyone's interested, a nice piece of property in Bird Creek, 2.5 acres. We have tried for a while. This has quite a bit of wetlands, but it's a nice piece of property. We get a lot of interest in it, but just no contracts, no offers yet. One of the things that we've been working on for some time, for those of you who are familiar with Carroll Creek, this is our 90 acres in Carroll Creek. This is in Eagle River. We were approached by AWW needing a reservoir site. In order to plat out that site, we had to update our plan. So we've spent the last 1.5 years updating that plan. It is now complete. The Assembly approved it, and we are now in platting process to plat out that parcel for AWW. And we were just told this morning that it is in their 6-year capital plan now to go ahead and construct that reservoir. This is a parcel, 19.5 acres. We went through the commission, we brought it forward in our plan, got approval from the commission, also approval from the Assembly to dispose of this land, and it came back and was approved on Wednesday night for a preliminary plat in Eagle River for 12 home site lots. So this is what happens when we put HLB land out for development, especially for housing. Very quickly, we're hoping that it comes back in the form of a plat for a subdivision, and so you'll see some homes in that area hopefully this summer. One of the things, many of you are aware that the former compost site next to Clitheroe is being proposed for a treatment campus. So we were obligated, before that goes into full development, to make sure that that area was cleaned up, and we have cleaned it all up. All the environmental issues and so on, we've spent the last several years and quite a bit of money doing that, but it looks great today if any of you have been out there. So we're getting closer and closer ready to look at a proposed treatment development out there.
Great.
We now have 200 acres of wetlands that are under conservation easements that we manage. Many of them are for everything from Arlberg to 100th Avenue. All of those conservation easements we manage on a yearly basis, and we will manage for perpetuity. So I want to highlight a couple of the activities that we planned for this year that are in our one-year plan. As I said, this is the preliminary plat for Carroll Creek. So we are doing a community meeting that's required before we can apply for the plat. That's on May 17th. But we'll track plat it out and then reappraise that property for AWW and go into contract to sell that to them so they can go forward with their reservoir development. This is the parcel. Many of you have been involved. We went through several things on this one. First a plat, then we rezoned this to R6. This is 2144C up on the hillside on Potter Heights. Now we're ready to put it out onto the market for a competitive bid. However, it appears that there's going to be some issues on the hillside as far as a secondary access before more development can happen. So we're going to hold it off the market until we can be part of, or hopefully be part of a solution on that secondary access, because it is going to, it's not exactly a moratorium, but it's definitely going to slow down development. John?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, Mr. Wildman.
But that would be certainly less than 30 units on there, a dozen or so. I mean, you're not getting the threshold, right?
So through the chair, actually we are at a point now where the traffic department, the fire department, and the planning department are looking at future subdivision development on Upper Hillside because the cumulative impact on the single roads is greater than 30. We're at a serious decision point on how we can move forward with future Hillside Road because it's getting tough. So because of those challenges, and we have private subdivisions that are currently being denied, which I like to think of as being negotiated rather than denied, we really have to seriously look at the issue of secondary access and how we can plan for that in the future. So that helped influence our decision on this parcel.
Okay. And not to say that's wrong. I mean, I've been worried. Its max is unfair. Yours is 15 units, so you can develop with the guy who's 30 across the street can't. It's like, doesn't fully make sense, though it isn't. I understand the problem.
Through the chair, Mr. Wilton, that's exactly how we feel. We would rather be part of the solution and hold ours off the market for a while before we put it on. We want to solve this before, we put it on the market.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Mr. Constant.
Yeah, just for people's recollection, this was a process by which I declared a conflict and didn't vote for the planning process that was moved forward. And I don't see a conflict here today, but I just want it stated on the record that that was part of this discussion in the previous instance before the body.
So,
Mr. Peterson.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is there a plan to connect the road up there so that there isn't a secondary exit, up there by Grease Drive at the top where you can get connected and come back down Water Valley Road?
My understanding through the chair, Mr. Peterson, that there are two potential routes. One is generally the area that you're talking about down through Finland, and the other one is across, is it Mountain Air?
Not
Below Mountain Air?
Finland.
Finland? On this one, it would be Finland.
Yeah.
Yes, because this is the closest to that. But we do have a couple of potential spots, but they're, it's a matter of funding, and this Finland is outside, I believe, of Lursa. So if we fix it, who takes care of it? So it's complex, and it really, bright minds need to sit down and figure this one out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I'm curious about that too. I don't know if Mr. Welton or Ms. LaFrance has any ideas about that. I'd love to hear them at some point.
I have ideas, but no solution. Except for $7 million.
Yeah.
$7 million. Well, $7 million isn't,
Where you can't, it's outside of ours, so it's not coming from bonds. I mean,
Oh.
It's got to come from the state. This is what we've been
State.
doing, and that's,
Yeah.
or somehow the city does what they did with Golden View and annexed that little right of way as part of ours, so that starts wearing thin as a solution.
Right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Welton. Can you continue, Ms. Ward?
And then for this year, as we're completing phase 1, we're now starting the research. We're going to start preliminary engineering and cost estimates on completing phase 2 and phase 3. This is a very heavily supported area and project in Girdwood. We get probably more comments on this than any other project. The community really wants to see this completed, so we're going to figure out how to finish the next 2 phases of the Girdwood. This is Girdwood Industrial Park, and see how we can finish it. As I said, we have a long list of people who would either lease or buy if they were available.
Are you allowed to give us a sense of who that is? I mean, is that held confidential? Or, I'm curious, what kind of industrial businesses would want to go to Girdwood?
Well, the businesses that are there today are excavators. And our permits are even, the fire department has a permit, the road service board has a permit. So, but they're not on lots. Those are on yearly revocable permits. They want permanent areas. And until we actually plat and complete the construction, they can't build warehouses, they can't have any structures, there's nothing that's permanent for them. So we have several that have proposed warehouses, some other ideas down there, but they have to actually have a lot, a completed lot, in order to do that, to get a building permit.
Mr. Trainey and Mr. Wellington.
Through the chair, Rob, are we going to get a breakdown on the residential property the city owns down in Girdwood area? I've been asking the administrations, last 2 administrations, I want a breakdown on what we can do to take, there's a real large property owner there, move it into private ownership. What's the plan for the residential area we've got down there? So we have a lot.
We do, through the chair, Mr. Trainey, we do have a lot of land down there. It's somewhat constrained, 3 constraints. A lot of it's steep slopes, a lot of it's wetlands, and a lot of it lacks utilities. So we have many places, just like Holton Hills. We were hoping to be able to do something with Holton Hills. It has water, but it doesn't have sewer. Several other parcels, there's no water on one side of Alyeska Highway. And so everybody's on wells, and they're starting to have some hydrology issues down there. So we have to look at the areas where we can overcome some of those development constraints, and we are looking at those. We have a lot of people who really, really would like to have some more housing lots down there. Housing is one of their biggest issues, affordable housing.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because I'm going to keep asking that question. Because I really hate it. The city, Muni, being the largest landowner in that part of our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainey. Mr. Wellington, are you good? Okay, let's continue, Ms. Ward.
Okay. This is the former Native Hospital site. This is in Mr. Constant's Assembly District. And our plan this year is we're going to actually start concept master planning for this. We need to study on what is the highest and best use for the development of this property. It's been used for temporary laydown yards and so on. And we can continue to use it for temporary uses, but we really need to figure out what does it need to be, in the future? What is its highest and best use? So we'll be working on a study for that this year.
Mr. Trainey.
Thank you. Through the chair, Robin, would you reach out to the Native community too, and see the sensitivities they have to it? Because the one time I wanted to put a dog park in there, and I got a lot of pushback from the Native community because Native people had died there, and they did not want to have dogs running on it. So would you find out before you get the process what you want to do there? Talk to the Native community, see what's acceptable to them.
Certainly.
And since this map is up here, I'm just going to point out, this is Party Hill. The homestead we cleared out was here and here. And so there were 5 people here and 4 people here. All of that havoc this week was about.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Ward.
And we are very close to finding a site with the Corps of Engineers that will be approved for our wetlands mitigation bank. This is our proposal for our first bank site. These are the wetlands that are in section 36. And we are very close to making application on that. The delineation has been completed. We know what we have there. We know the area. And hopefully by this time next year, we can announce that we actually have a mitigation bank in process. We're continuing to do mitigation wetlands credits, but it's on a per métier or a case-by-case basis. It is our goal to actually have the bank set up. So this will be our first bank site that we'll be proposing. Now, once we've put a conservation easement on this, then we can go ahead and transfer the underlying land to Parks and Rec. And so that's all we're waiting for to transfer that.
Where is section 36?
Through the chair, Mr. Constant, that is up Clark's Road. So if you go up in Bear Valley, yeah, it's up in Bear Valley area.
Mr. Weldon.
So, section 36 has a plan. How much of the trails and parking and so on would be built before you transfer to parks?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, that we've asked the community council to start trail concepts and so on, but they've been slow to move. So, and we really want to get this going. So, what we've actually done is we're writing the conservation easement flexible enough for trails, so wetlands could have boardwalks, soft trails in uplands, and not laying out actually a plan, but allowing certain types of trails throughout. So it's not going to be a prohibited use; it will be an allowed use. So we're writing it fairly broadly so that we can go in then and do a trails plan.
That's good. Another concern is that once it goes to parks, there's a fear up there when we had the issue with parks service area expansion. They say, well, if you put trailheads up here, they won't be monitored, we'll have drugs and all kinds of horrible things happening with them. And if this is transferred to parks, the parks doesn't have the resources to monitor it well, then you prove their case, and it'd be even harder to get more access to Tree State Park. So is that what happens? You put a parking lot in there before you have the resources to obligated.
Well, we'd have to figure out how to protect them, like the level, and figure out how we're going to manage the property. We do have some challenges with it because it's going to come with a lot of intended use. And we're going to have to figure out how to manage that into the operation we have.
All right, thanks.
This kind of goes back into our discussion regarding expanding the service area.
Mr. Weddleton, in the master plan, there isn't a parking lot in this area that's planned. This would be right now. It looks like it's only trails, I believe. Is that correct?
Right. No, a piece of this is there's a connector that goes to Historical Park.
So before you move on from here, I'm curious, is it called Section 36 because of the old Jeffersonian platting system?
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. So
Section 16s and Section 36s were dedicated to municipalities and to government entities.
Going
in
back
the
to
old platting system, you're exactly
going back
right.
to literally Thomas Jefferson. It was fascinating history of the
First
country.
president we ever had was him, by his own mission.
Very good. All right, Ms. Ward.
And then on the west side, we have Coastal Trail. This is a busy place, actually. We have not only the Coastal Trail along these, this is at the very end of the airport runway. We also have pipelines and so on. And in our plan, we are proposing to create an IGP, which is municipal alphabet soup for an intergovernmental permit, which is how we permit in between departments. Right now, the Coastal Trail is actually being managed by the Parks Department. Everything pretty much to the west that's within the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge is actually being managed by the state under an agreement between the MOA and the state. So to actually document and codify what's actually happening today, we're proposing to put an IGC over the center line of the Coastal Trail with buffers on either side and transfer that to that IGP over to Parks and Rec, again, which will document what is actually happening. The rest of the property, especially to the north there, much of that is already Clitheroe Center and the former compost area, which we assume is going to eventually be our treatment complex and campus out there.
It's unfortunate that Mr. Croft and Mr. Steele, neither of them are here.
Right.
I know Mr. Croft is out of the state temporarily, but I imagine they would have some questions about this. But
And we anticipate Tuesday night they will. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
great. Moving on.
And our Southtown site, this is, you know, Mr. Trainee through the chair, this is one of those sites that we've still been looking at for housing. This is one site that may be possible, which is, this is where in the top right corner, you'll see that's the new fire station and our library and community center and so on. And this is the property that's south of that. We tracted it out. It was a squirrel cages for many, many years, and we
That's what I wanna
tracted
know
it.
about
Yeah,
the squirrel cages.
squirrel cages.
What?
That's what it
There's a
was.
piece of property down there, it's referred to as a squirrel cages. No squirrels, just the way it's laid out.
Just the way it was laid out, yeah, in circles with little tiny lots. So it was replatted, and the parcel, this is Egloff, or I mean, this is Cariolis that goes down the middle there. The would be the east side of that. That has the opportunity for housing, and if you've been hearing about the Girdwood Family Village, that's the proposed area for that. But it comes again with some development constraints. If we have enough traffic there, we're probably going to be required to do a secondary access there, clear out to Alyeska Highway, including a bridge, which is going to be very expensive. So, but it is one of the areas that we are looking at for housing.
Mr. Trainee.
Robin, you said earlier when you started this discussion that you guys do that, you guys handle the Forest Fair property. Are you guys impacted by that lawsuit as far as dealing with property
First
this
Amendment
year?
lawsuit.
Our through the chair, Mr. Trainee, our property will be, I probably should refer to, I mean, Mr. Rada knows a lot more about it. It's really his permit and the permitted area where the vendors are, which is more impacted. Our area is more for camping. This is where they camp.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. You want to continue, Ms. Ward?
Are we done? Okay, and I think that's just our highlights. We wanted to just kind of give you an overview, and then we'll open it up for any questions or any discussion that you have.
Yeah, we've got a half hour. Do any of my colleagues, I think there are some amendments here, is that right? Do you want to start with that, Mr. Weddleton?
You got, I think you got my email.
I did.
Yeah, so I had a couple.
You should the lights back to Chris.
Good.
Thank you, sir.
So I'll just, if people have this, I have two amendments that were handed down in our package here. So number one is, it's a piece of property off of Goldenview Drive next to Goldenview Elementary. It's about 9.5 acres. And it's a nice piece of property. And it's, but it abuts other property up there that goes down the hill to basically Potter Marsh. And it's potentially very developable. It's been sitting for a variety of reasons. But the owner of one big part of it died recently. And apparently his family is not interested, may not be interested in keeping it. And then another parcel just to the south is GCI. Did I get that right? Which one? And they're in a different business. We may not want that. So the idea that if those become in play in the next year or two, we might want to hang on to this 10 acres. It might be part of a combined, where would road go, some other aspects of it. So recommendation here is just to move it back. I think you have it in this immediate put up for sale. This is going to bump it back at least a year just to see if the property's going.
Through the chair, Mr. Welton, it's actually been in our current work plan, I think, for a couple of years now. But I think I'll let Nicole. This is Nicole Jones-Vogel, who is one of our senior land management officers for Heritage Land Bank.
So this particular parcel we feel would be a great thing to keep in the one-year work plan because of the uncertainty of what's going to happen in the adjacent properties. It's part of a sub-area or a special study area in the Hillside District Plan to look for an access solution, and having it available already sort of in queue for our one-year plan will make us more available to start discussions if something were to happen adjacent to that parcel.
So when I read it, I think, oh, they're going to put it up for sale. And then that could be wrong. But if you did that to bought it, now it's out.
So a disposal could be the right-of-way being disposed of. It doesn't have to be like a competitive bid per se.
Are you planning on to put it on the market though? To sell? I mean, I wouldn't oppose that if we knew it wasn't likely part of these other two. I think.
Through the chair, Mr. Welton, we know that it could play a part in a secondary road access up through. It comes up from Potter Valley Road across some of our other properties. So if you kind of envision, this is the hat, we have the boots, and there are the two big private parcels. We always expected that it would take all three, the municipality, GCI, and whoever will own that Bergman property. It takes all three of us to get together to figure this out because it requires a major access. So, and it's in the district plan as a study area. So even if we, for some reason, did sell it or anything, it has to have provisions to be able to allow a road to go through that.
So I may withdraw that.
Okay.
I'll scratch my head over the weekend. And then Amendment 2 moves parcel 2-147.
Oh.
Is no real access to it. It's right up against Trugan State Park. It's a big piece of, how many acres? It's fairly large.
It's pretty large.
Yeah, so it's potential for trade with Trugan State Park, or maybe ultimately there will be access to it. It could be great access to the park. And this is just to take it from potential disposals to potential projects. And the project really be negotiated with Trugan State Park for a trade or something like that. And that was something that Robinson was getting.
And we're fine with that.
Okay. So is this a situation where he still needs to propose it and do it, or because we're past the point where you could make those changes?
That is correct. He
So
would
he'll
have to do
a
that
floor
at the
amendment?
assembly. Correct.
Okay. Can you just, for my own education, explain to me the legal difference and the practical difference of moving something from potential disposals to potential projects? Because it seems like a project is a type of disposal in my mind.
Mr. Dunbar, a project may not be a disposal. We may do our own work on it. It may be a project that we work on staff-wise.
Yeah.
A disposal means it's available for a lease, an easement, for sale. So disposals to us mean that there's going to be an action in front of the assembly where some interest in that could be disposed to another party. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's funny because I wrote my whole law school thesis on the word disposal and the fact that the founders intended almost all public lands to be disposed of rather than held indefinitely by the BLM, for example. Anyway, yes, I agree with your legal interpretation of the word disposal. Good.
Time left you in the hindsight, didn't it? 'Cause
Huh?
now we keep everything, don't let anything go.
Well, that's I ultimately recommended to Parnell's Department of Law to not pursue litigation because federal jurisprudence had moved so much in that direction through the courts. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Ms. LaFrance, you have a...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Amendment number 1, under Chapter 3, under 2018 potential projects, a request on page 25 to add, conduct a study to identify a potential site for the location of an additional homeless shelter to be operated presumably by a non-profit organization. And this amendment is the result of some of the conversations we've had in the meetings, like the one right before this, where clearly some of the facilities are overburdened, and also conversations about where there have been suggestions along MLK Drive and downtown, of course. This is just part of that conversation.
Is this somebody on the bridge?
Yeah, it's me, Eric Croft.
Oh. How long have you... Okay, so we are joined by Mr. Croft. Great. Awesome. So we can hear some feedback there, Eric.
Children
I
playing.
hear the kids. Put yourself on mute, Eric.
Okay.
So, Ms. Ward, do you want to comment on this amendment?
Through the chair, Ms. LaFrance, to be frank, I'd rather spend my time figuring out how to reduce the population in the current shelter than finding locations for new ones. But if you want to put that in there, we can certainly do that. We would have to figure out how to fund a study like that, and would it include private land or just municipal land? And the other thing to be aware of is that you're absolutely right about the location. I don't know of a neighborhood that's going to welcome it. So just, that's just my
Mr.
opinion.
Mr. Training.
Rob, if you do this, I want south of Diamond. Take Diamond, Drummond Cross, south of Diamond. Anything else is just building up the same problem we got now.
Did you just
I wanna
begin
get-
with Diamond?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, okay.
I want another part of Anchorage to enjoy this.
So, I guess I want to ask you, Ms. Ward, and I agree with the intent of what Ms. LaFrance is asking, but I am curious if that is a typical thing that's done through the HLB process, or when we look for something like that, is it Yes. Is this something that are these kind of projects typical to the HLB plan?
If it were to be only on HLB property, in other words, if the request is there any HLB property that could, that is either zoned property properly or would be in a location that would be a potential shelter site, that I would say that would be fairly normal. If it's private land plus general real estate plus, airport or railroad, or if it's all other lands, that might not be as normal.
Could the answer, Ms. LaFrancis is, I guess what you're getting at too, could the answer be we don't think there is a good site on HLB property? Or, I guess this is a question for you, Ms. LaFrancis, is it you want the best potential land, or could one of their answers be we don't think any of our land is really appropriate?
I guess if that was the answer, then we'd have to think about what would be the next step.
Right.
I'd have to think about that more.
Mr. Constant, then Mr. Schutte, and then Mr. Train.
The administration has already clearly stated that they have zero intention of additional crisis shelter services. I don't necessarily agree with them, and I also don't accept the answer that no other neighborhood would accept this, so what's happening is acceptable. And so I welcome the idea of let's ask this question, and maybe that adds some pressure to the administration to implement their solutions that they continue to talk about. But we see only marginal progress towards, or worse, increase of volumes of people on the street. And so it's an interesting question, and I like the idea of lighting a fire.
Mr. Schutte, and then Mr. Train, and then Mr. Gates.
Sure. I was just going to add that she could not be here today to comment on this, but we did ask for input from Nancy Burke, the homelessness coordinator. And her input was largely what Robin had indicated, and a slice of what Senator Constant had indicated. In a nutshell, it's that this is not the right place to place a homelessness responsibility. The HLB work plan is not. It is important to note, though, that HLB and Robin is joined at the hip, literally, with Nancy on finding solutions to homelessness, whether that means shelters or, as the current direction is, the path to independence, to find ways to get people into housing, whether that is in existing privately owned residents like the Widener deal, whether that is looking at, is there a need for additional shelters across town? So I think that we're in a bit of a bind because we completely agree with the intent of what you'd like to ask. I think the feeling of the homelessness coordinator, and certainly on our part in HLB, is that it is not an HLB work plan item, but we would like to take your ask and fold it into, as Chris indicated, to fold it into the work that the homelessness coordinator and her team are doing.
Mr. Trainee, and then Mr. Gates, and then Mr. Constant, and then Mr. Peterson, and then Mr. Weddleton.
Robin, I'd like to see you at least do this, identify tracts of property that you have, because quite frankly, administrations come and go. I've been here a while. I've seen administrations come and they leave without anything ever being done. That may be the case with respect to this. So it'd be nice for you to identify for the assembly what tracts of property we have. Then it's up to us to decide if it meets our needs. But like I said, administrations come and administrations go. So do homeless coordinators. So, but you've been here, Robin, longer than I have been. I've seen your great shiny figures here for a long time. And you've got the knowledge on tracts of land that they don't have. So I'd appreciate something from you to go through this. Thank you.
Mr. Dunbar, can I respond to that? I have no problem with doing that. I agree, though, with Mr. Schutte that this may not be, the HLB plan may not be the place to do that. It probably needs to be in either my chief housing officer or the director of real estate, in general real estate, working with the homeless coordinator. I don't have a problem with doing that. I'm just not sure that we can really do this other than on HLB properties in this venue. That's all I was trying to say.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Mr. Gates.
Yeah, I was also going to mention maybe some other approaches that can take in this sort of proposal. I'm not sure if it fits, but maybe the public facility site selection. I'm not sure we would call a homeless shelter operated by a nonprofit a public facility by the definition. But Mr. Schutte maybe know more about that process and how it's run. And I guess another alternative might be simply doing an assembly resolution saying the assembly wants as a policy to find out whether homeless shelter is needed. Is it feasible? What are the possible sites convenient? And ask administration to report back to the assembly that information, just stand on a resolution completely about that subject. So that's something you could write in the administration. Did you, I don't know if there's something one could add about public facility site selection process and whether it might be, Mr. Shirley?
Sure. Through the chair, what he's referring to is, so what I think the spirit of the amendment is asking for is simply an inventory of land. And what Assembly Council is referring to is if there ever was movement towards creating an additional site, an additional homeless shelter site, that it would have to go through what's known as a public facility site selection process. And that public facility site selection process is designed to analyze the needs of the public facility and the proposed locations for the public facility to determine whether or not given locations are suitable based on the existing land use codes and the mission of whatever entity is looking for a new site. So that doesn't necessarily need to be addressed in this, but that is a secondary step that if an additional site were to be pursued, that it would have to go through. But as I understand it, unless I'm misunderstanding the intention of the intent of the ordinance, it's simply to ask the question of capacity or inventory.
Mr. Constant?
I'll defer.
Okay, Mr. Peterson?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just looking at this attachment A dates version. It says, have we talked about these
This is
amendments?
last year's.
These are last year's?
And much of them were taken care of in the new draft.
Okay.
Those aren't my amendments, but I wrote them for assembly members and submitted them last year.
Last year, oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Weddleton, we're still discussing Ms. LaFrance's amendment.
Okay, let me just make a correction there. Many of them related to the hillside were taken care of on that, this one last year.
Okay, but you were in the queue before about Ms. LaFrance's?
Yes. Sorry, but it sounds like we jumped it.
No, so you're in the queue now. You have more discussion about.
Well, just briefly, I would say that this, a study like this would be under your purview. I mean, I understand maybe not HLB real estate, but in your mission it says promote orderly development, which we do not have going on down where the homeless are now. Right. And finding some other place for them would be in the mission, I think, fairly clearly.
Okay. Well, I think that's, Ms. LaFrance, do you want to have any concluding remarks on your amendment? We could also discuss on Tuesday night.
No, I mean, just the first few words, conduct a study to identify, I mean, I don't know, identifying potential sites, maybe would be.
You mean strike the line, conduct a study to, and just start with identify?
Leave it, okay, we can talk about it Tuesday.
Yeah, we can do amendment on Tuesday if you'd like. Still south of my district.
What did I do this time?
He said he wants to rename Tudor Road.
Everyone wants to rename their streets Third Avenue.
Okay, so
I have recognition on that too.
I think that's it in terms of proposed amendments. Mr. Croft, did you have anything you wanted to discuss at this? Yeah.
I think he might have dropped out too, because I heard 3 Bs.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, well, we've received a document from a member of the public. We have 15 minutes, so we can discuss it now.
That's long enough for Kathy.
What's that?
That's not long enough for Kathy.
Well, it's what we have. So, Ms. Gleason, would you like to talk about the documents you handed to us?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Chair and members of the Assembly. Carrington Community Council submitted a 9-page document that I have submitted to the Assembly members at least a couple of times, the most recent yesterday. And in anticipation of this work session and Tuesday's hearing on the approval of the HLB plan. We've got quite a few amendments, some minor ones that HLB accepted, some of the other ones are pretty major and they were denied or rejected. Especially if you look at the attachments, kind of document that you're going to hand it out, and look at which parcels on the second amendment, the second second exhibit, it shows the parcels west of the airport that Ms. Ward had put up on the screen. Where the coastal trail and a section of the
We don't have any
so,
copies.
Do you have copies of this, Ms.
We have
Ward?
one. We have one.
They have one here, Chris.
oh, here, I've got an extra
Oh,
one.
thank you.
Yeah. So it's the one that has the gate amendment from last year on the cover, and those are attachments. So just and Robin's put it up on the screen as well. Carrying Community Council's position, and we've been asking for literally decades, is that the areas that are not being used for community institutional facilities, like the Cook Rope Center, which is now leaving and not renewing their lease, or any other proposed facility, which we haven't gotten a lot of information on. But those areas outside of that development in that designated area be transferred to the Parks Department. We've got our premier coastal trail running through it. We've got a section of the System Loop Trail. So if you look at attachments, D on this statement handout, you'll see where the System Loop Trail is and the coastal trail with regard to their location within these parcels. The natural open space was identified in the comprehensive 2020 plan as being an important natural habitat. Unfortunately, the airport has cleared all of their land that used to be vegetated up to the municipal boundaries. So what's left, vegetation-wise, is critical habitat that needs to be preserved. As was mentioned, the coastal trail itself is already being managed by the Parks Department. And so we feel like the entire area that's not being used for other purposes and that is now designated in the 2040 land use plan, which is attachment C. It's like this on the land use plan map. Is designated now parks and natural area. And Trinidad Community Council worked very hard with the planning department and the planning and zoning commission to have that designated as such. And so we see all the stars aligning now. The airport went on record with the planning department during the development of the 2040 plan that they do not have any desire to acquire this land. And that's, if you look at the very last attachment on this attachment packet, it's the airport master plan that was approved in December of 2014. They show no acquisition nor development in any of this HLB land. And they've gone on record saying they don't want it. So the airport doesn't want it. This is municipal land that has been used for decades, ever since the coastal trail was built, as parkland. And so we feel it's time for this area to actually become dedicated parkland. And we know that the Parks Department has to make that request of the HLB. John, your amendment, which is the first page that you helped draft with Mr. Gates, that then didn't ever get in a 2017 plan, is what we're asking for, only it's slightly amended for this year, in our comment letter on page 6. The exact same wording, except it's been updated slightly. What this is asking for is an opportunity for HLB and the Parks Department and the Community Council and any other stakeholders to sit down and collaborate to see how we can make that happen. It's just, it doesn't say it will be transferred. So I think this is a very reasonable amendment to include in this plan that within the next year, in the 2018 plan, we have the opportunity to sit down in one room at one table and talk about the possibilities of what can happen so that this area in green on the 2040 land use plan, parks or natural area, ends up being permanently protected in some way or another. If it's not dedicated parkland, maybe conservation easement. We're open to that alternative if that works better for at an administrative level. But what we really don't feel is an intergovernmental agreement that is proposed in the current draft. We were not consulted about that idea, which is disappointing considering our position about this for years and years. It doesn't provide, I don't know what kind of buffer they're looking at, but the point is, the entire area now designated in green on that map is the buffer. And I'm sure there are other dedicated parklands that have pipelines and utility easements and so forth. So somehow they're managing to go with that. So I think this would be no different. And the key thing, ever since last year, and then I'll stop talking so you guys can ask me any questions, is that Dan and I, my husband Dan and I, it's now a year's offer to cover all administrative costs associated with this transfer. Because last year it was thrown out that we don't have any money. This would be really expensive to do that intergovernmental transfer. I don't know how much it's going to cost. Dan doesn't know how much it's going to cost. But we are telling you right now, we don't want that to be a roadblock to something that our community council sees as the highest and best use of this land for a long time. We want to see it happen sooner rather than later. And we think all of the plans, whether it's the airport plan, the land use plan, the comprehensive plan, they all say this is what the way to go. And so now it's the time to do that. We really feel like we want an opportunity to sit down and talk about all the details. What's it going to take? How can we get this land preserved? And if it's conservation easement rather than dedicated parkland, maybe that's an alternative. So the amendment that John drafted last year and that we're proposing it just be slightly amended as an update for this year, we would love for that to the Assembly to support turning in Community Council in that effort. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gleason. Mr. Trainee.
Thank you. Through the chair, Kathy, did you talk to Croft and Steele on these amendments? Because somebody's got to bring these forward.
I understand. I have been trying to contact particularly Eric because he had emailed me a couple of weeks ago or so, want to sit down, want to go over this. And unfortunately, he's not gotten back to me. I really feel it's unfortunate that I haven't had an opportunity to sit down with him before today's work session.
How about Tim?
He hasn't responded.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you. This is a question for Mr. Schutte. Chris, refresh my memory. Last year when we did this 2040 land use plan, I thought that the airport people said that they do have future visions for that area, just not in the next 10 years.
Not for, through the chair, I can't really see the map clearly, so I'm probably going to screw up the parcel names, but Nicole or Robin can see more clearly. What's the parcel ID, or I guess the HLB parcel number for the area where they potentially wanted to expand westward?
It would be towards the AWW side.
Because I can't see the map very well.
Yeah,
But
right.
anyway, long story short, is there is a belief that at some point they would want to do an expansion. It was only on one portion of the western side of the airport. It has not, from my recollection, touched all of these parcels that are being referenced, but it is on that west side.
So just a quick follow-up, then I would like to see the document from the airport master plan that shows that this is something that's agreeable to them.
Mr. Weddleton, before we go back to Ms. Gleason, I'm curious. Mr. Weddleton, so you offered this amendment originally. Do you intend to offer it again in some updated version, or no? I'm sorry I put you on the spot like that.
No, that's fine. I'm sympathetic with the reasons for it, and so I don't think it's wrong, and I suppose I might, but I would leave it preferably to Tim or Eric.
Yeah.
This is a citywide, it's not my district, but the coastal trail and these areas and the parks, there are citywide resources, just like Barton or Pleasanton Park and so on. So it's not like I would say hands off, obviously, but
So assuming
I expected them to do it.
Like hypothetically, if Mr. Weddleton were to do that, or if Eric or Tim were to take this amendment and offer it again, what would be the HLB's position on it, Ms. Ward? Or Mr. Schutte, if you want to speak to the administration more broadly?
Well, I was hoping to be on the phone because, as Robin indicated, we have met with Mr. Croft on this. And he is crafting or has crafted an amendment to present a solution to this problem. And Robin, if you want to go over it sort of at a high level, he's not here, so I hate speaking on his behalf, but he has asked us for assistance in putting together a proposed amendment.
So, as we talked to him through the chair, as we talked to him, we think that one of the things that we can do, which I think would be closer to a compromise to what Turnagain Community Council is looking for, is I believe that he is going to craft an amendment that would take the center line of the coastal trail with a 100-foot buffer on the east side and basically transfer management to Parks and Rec of that 100-foot buffer to the center line and everything west of that to Parks and Rec. Now, we do that with an exhibit because until it's platted and rezoned, we can't do it formally by parcel. But we have several parcels that are managed by more than one department. Bartlett School is one. AWW Real Estate and School District all have management authority on certain parts, and we do that by exhibit. So that was one of the compromises that we proposed, was that, again, 100 feet to the coastal trail and everything west of that would be transferred to Parks and Rec.
And, okay. And is that for the entire length of the coastal trail? Is this just in this portion of the coastal trail?
Yeah, we can only do that in our portions that
Right.
we have in the inventory for HLB.
Just quick on that.
Yeah, Mr. Constant.
So that still allows for that's this intergovernmental piece you're talking about?
No, this would be a management transfer. An intergovernmental permit is like an easement.
So it's separate from the part you were previously talking about?
Correct. It goes one step further until we can plat and rezone the area. This is actually zoned it's called a T, a transition zone, which is in old code, so it's not even a current code.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Gleason, so you said you haven't spoken with Mr. Croft about that particular amendment, or you have?
No, I have not. This is a complete surprise for me, and my response to Mr. Constant would be Exhibit E on my handout. It's the comment response that the planning department did during the development of the 2040 land use plan, and the portion that I highlighted that was discussed. And so this is when the declaration from the planning department by the airport occurred. Title 21 state, that part I don't have, because I thought you would accept anyway, that was the one last year. It says that they talked to the airport said they have no plans for this area. And if you look at the last exhibit in the handout, at their own master plan, they do not show any development or extension or acquisition of this land. They don't need it, they don't want it. They've been very declarative and not put a 10-year cap on it. And the area that Mr. Schutte was talking about was Point Warrenzoff Park to the north. That's the area that the airport wants if they want to build another north-south runway. It has nothing to do with this area. With regard to a compromise of you take the center line and you go 100 feet east, again, we don't feel that that is enough of a buffer to protect all of the natural area that has now been designated in the 2040 land use plan as park or natural area. If the airport doesn't want it, and the public and the community is behind this and it's being used as de facto parkland since the coastal trail was built, what's the pushback? Why do you want to still allow the other HLB land to remain in HLB, which is then vulnerable to acquisition by a private party? And if the coastal trail goes, the bluff erodes to the extent where someday the coastal trail may need to be moved inland, you're not allowing for that occurrence at some point in the future if you limit the buffer, that's the vegetative buffer that's remaining within the boundaries of those HLB parcels. I can tell you right now, Turnagain Community Council would not consider that any sort of reasonable compromise. Considering that you've got the 2020 comprehensive plan behind our argument and the 2040 land use plan, which supports all of this area being parks for natural area.
Okay, I'm going to give Ms. Ward
I just have a quick question. If we can, I would like a statement from the airport, because if we're talking about communications happened a year ago on a comment table, that's not sufficient enough for me to make an assumption
that they agree or don't agree.
Ms. Ward, would you like to make a final comment, and then we're going to close this work session?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, one final comment I would like to make is this is only a temporary compromise. Once we understand what the treatment compound, the land mass that they need and what they need for buffers and so on, we'll have a better idea where we can move forward. We may be able to increase that management authority quite a bit. Today, we just don't know because it's still in concept. So all we're trying to do is give a temporary compromise, and then we'll go back and we can change that exhibit at any point in time when we have a better idea of what that treatment campus will look like.
Okay, thank you. We're over time. This work session is closed.